You still think The Simpsons is just a cartoon? Think again. Over 35 seasons and 768 episodes, this show has managed to predict the unpredictable, turning crazy jokes into real-world events.
Yes, I will take good care of your wife.
Wait, what does that mean?
From political upheavals to scientific breakthroughs, it's almost like the writers knew something we didn't. What if I told you that a simple animated sitcom predicted one of the biggest scandals in global sports history?
Mr. Simpson, I am the Executive Vice President of the World Football Federation.
That a cartoon? Yes, a cartoon managed to foresee not only the winner of the 2014 FIFA World Cup, but also the implosion of FIFA itself. Sounds ridiculous, right?
There has been an epidemic of referees being bribed to throw games.
But The Simpsons did exactly that. You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee aired in March 2014, months before the World Cup kicked off in Brazil. The episode followed Homer Simpson as he was recruited to referee the tournament. FIFA, depicted as a deeply corrupt organization, turned to Homer because he was one of the only honest men left in football.
Yes, I will take good care of your wife.
Wait, what does that mean?
The plot involved match fixing, bribery, and, of course, Germany's victory.
With millions watching every kick and call at the World Cup, there's bound to be controversy.
Prosecutors in Switzerland have launched a criminal corruption probe.
Fast forward to real life. Germany wins the cup, FIFA officials are arrested, and the world watches as football's governing body crumbles under the weight of its own corruption. A lucky guess, or something more? Let's start with the World Cup prediction. The Simpsons placed Germany in the final, and Germany did win the real-life tournament. Sure, the show got one detail wrong. They pitted Germany against Brazil instead of Argentina. But in a way, it's still called one of the most humiliating moments in Brazilian football history. The episode showed Germany defeating Brazil, though only by a modest 2-0 score. The reality? Germany obliterated Brazil 7-1 in the semifinals, a massacre so brutal that Brazilian fans were openly sobbing in the stands. It wasn't just a loss. It was a national embarrassment, and The Simpsons saw it coming. Then there's the FIFA scandal. The episode didn't just joke about corruption, it nailed it. Homer found himself caught in a web of bribery attempts with shadowy figures trying to buy his favor. He refused, standing tall as the last honest referee in a world drowning in dirty money. At the time, this seemed like typical Simpsons satire, a playful jab at an organization with a less-than-perfect reputation. But just a year later, reality made satire look tame. In May 2015, Swiss authorities and the FBI swooped in on FIFA's headquarters. The charges? Widespread corruption, money laundering, and bribery schemes so vast they spanned decades. Over 24 officials were exposed, including FIFA Vice Presidents Jeffrey Webb and Eugenio Figueiredo. The investigation revealed a $150 million bribery network linked to World Cup bids for Russia 2018 and Qatar 2022. It wasn't just a scandal. It was the moment FIFA's rotten core was laid bare for the world to see. And The Simpsons predicted it. Even FIFA's internal chaos after the arrests mirrored the episode's absurdity. The organization found itself short on referees, just like in the show. Sponsors fled. Trust evaporated. Suddenly, a storyline that once seemed like an over-the-top cartoon gag felt like an eerie documentary. The Simpsons didn't just predict the FIFA scandal. Their track record of foresight goes much deeper, right into the heart of America's biggest sporting event. The Super Bowl, the most watched television event in the country. The ultimate stage for champions, where legends are made and millions of dollars change hands in bets. And The Simpsons? They called the winners before the games even happened. Coincidence? That's what they want you to think. But the facts say otherwise. Let's go back to 1992. Season 3, Episode 14, Lisa the Greek. A harmless little episode where Lisa discovers she has an uncanny ability to predict football outcomes. Homer, ever the opportunist, starts using her picks to place bets. But here's where it gets weird. In that very episode, Lisa predicts the Washington Redskins, now the Commanders, will defeat the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 26. 3 days later, that exact thing happens. One lucky guess? Maybe. But The Simpsons didn't stop there. For the next 2 years, they updated the episode's dialogue for reruns, replacing Washington's name with a new prediction. First, Lisa called the Dallas Cowboys to beat the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 27. Correct. The following year, she did it again. Dallas over Buffalo in Super Bowl 28. Spot on. And just to drive the point home, in another rerun, Lisa predicted the San Francisco 49ers would take down the San Diego Chargers in Super Bowl 29. Another win. That's 4 correct Super Bowl predictions in a row. At this point, you have to ask yourself, how? Some experts dismiss it as luck. Statistician Sir David Spiegelhalter calls it nothing more than a coincidence. But let's be real, how often do coincidences happen this consistently? John Ortved, author of The Simpsons, an uncensored, unauthorized history, offers a different theory. The Simpsons writers weren't just TV nerds, they were Ivy League-educated sports fanatics. They knew the game, they knew the trends, and they knew how to place a good bet. By now, you're seeing the pattern. The Simpsons doesn't just predict things, it calls them years in advance, like some kind of pop culture oracle hidden in plain sight. But what if I told you it even saw an Olympic upset coming 8 years before it happened? Not just any upset, one of the most improbable gold medal victories in Winter Olympics history. Yeah, curling. The sport most people forget exists until the Olympics roll around, where players slide stones across ice while their teammates furiously sweep the surface. It's not exactly the kind of event that dominates headlines, but in 2010, The Simpsons locked onto it. Season 21, Episode 12, Boy Meets Curl. Homer and Marge, in true Simpsons fashion, accidentally stumble into the world of competitive curling. They form a mixed doubles team with Seymour Skinner and his overbearing mother Agnes. Against all odds, they battle their way to the Vancouver Winter Olympics. And who do they face in the final? Sweden. And what happens? Team USA takes gold. Fast forward to 2018, Pyeongchang, South Korea. The US men's curling team, led by John Schuster, pulls off a real-life miracle. They defeat Sweden and win the country's first ever Olympic gold in curling. Did anyone see that coming? Nope. Except The Simpsons. Now, before you brush this off, this wasn't just a lucky guess. Curling had never been Team USA's game. They weren't the powerhouse. Sweden was. Yet somehow, The Simpsons crafted an episode in which America beat Sweden in Olympic curling, then watched reality unfold exactly the same way 8 years later. Sure, there were differences. The show depicted mixed doubles, while the real victory came from the men's team. And Russia took bronze in the episode, while Switzerland claimed it in 2018. But come on, the core prediction, US curling team defeats Sweden for gold, was dead on. When the real-life victory happened, the internet exploded. Fans dug up the old episode, media outlets ran headlines about yet another Simpsons prophecy fulfilled, and even Rob Lazebnik, the episode's writer, acknowledged the eerie connection. He laughed it off as a coincidence. Just another example of The Simpsons tapping into cultural trends before they become major moments in history. But at what point do these coincidences stop being random? How does a single TV show keep beating reality to the punch? At this point, it's beyond a joke. It's beyond coincidence. The Simpsons doesn't just predict sports. It doesn't just predict scandals. It predicts Nobel Prize winners. The highest academic honor in the world. A prize that takes decades of groundbreaking research to earn. And somehow, The Simpsons casually called one 6 years before it happened. Let's talk about Season 22, Episode 1, Elementary School Musical. A standard Lisa-centric episode, right? Wrong. Tucked inside is one of the show's most bizarrely accurate predictions. Lisa, Milhouse, Martin, and Database are sitting around, making bets on future Nobel Prize winners. And Milhouse? He puts his money on Bengt R. Holmstrom for economics, a name most viewers had never even heard of, a name that at the time belonged to a respected but relatively low-profile Finnish economist. Fast forward 6 years. October 10th, 2016. The real Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences is announced, and guess who wins? Bengt R. Holmstrom. What are the odds? 1,000,000 to 1? 1 billion? How many people were betting on a Finnish contract theory specialist to win the most prestigious award in his field? The Simpsons did. Now, if you're thinking, okay, but maybe Holmstrom was already famous in economic circles, maybe it wasn't such a crazy guess, let's put that theory to rest. While he was respected, he wasn't exactly a household name. Even in academic circles, he wasn't an obvious frontrunner for a Nobel. But The Simpsons pinpointed him years before the prize committee did. And not just him. The show's fake betting pool had real-world credibility. Holmstrom's work, groundbreaking. He and Oliver Hart transformed how we understand contracts, how they shape economies, influence businesses, and dictate relationships between employers and employees. Moral hazard, incentives, contract design, all of it. That's what got him the prize. That's what changed the world. And The Simpsons somehow saw it coming before the Nobel Committee did. And get this, the prediction wasn't even the main joke of the scene. It was just there, in the background, buried under a storyline about Krusty the Clown mistakenly believing he'd won a Nobel Peace Prize. And then, out of nowhere, The Simpsons does it again. Not with politics, not with sports, not with global scandals, but with Cypress Hill and the London Symphony Orchestra. You remember the 1996 episode, Homer Palooza, right? In this gem, Homer stumbles into a music festival, and during the chaos, a roadie casually asks, "Who's playing with the London Symphony Orchestra?" Somebody ordered the London Symphony Orchestra. Possibly While High? Cypress Hill, I'm looking in your direction. Cue the animated version of Cypress Hill awkwardly admitting they might have ordered the orchestra, followed by a hilarious exchange where the LSO wonders if they know the classic Insane in the Brain. It's all absurd, as expected, but also a little too on the nose. And if you thought that was just a weird joke, buckle up. Nearly 30 years later, Cypress Hill and the London Symphony Orchestra actually did team up. On July 10th, 2024, at the Royal Albert Hall in London, a venue so iconic it's practically royalty, they performed together just like the show predicted. It wasn't a fluke. This had been building for years. It started as a playful tease when Cypress Hill posted their cameo from Homer Palooza on social media back in 2017. The LSO responded with some sarcastic humor, clearly enjoying the joke. But by April 2023, it wasn't just playful banter anymore. Cypress Hill confirmed it. This thing was going to happen. They were really going to make the impossible happen. Hip-hop meets classical music at the Royal Albert Hall. Let that sink in. A group known for raucous, rebellious hip-hop like Insane in the Brain is going to be backed by an orchestra at one of the most prestigious venues in the world. What is this? A dream come true, according to both the band and the orchestra. Be Real from Cypress Hill called it a checklist moment. And who can blame him? You've got a Grammy-nominated group performing with one of the most famous orchestras in history. The set list? Oh, it was just as epic. They didn't hold back. Hits from their legendary album Black Sunday, tracks like Insane in the Brain and I Wanna Get High, blended with the sweeping grandeur of the LSO. Fans were in disbelief. They couldn't believe they were seeing a genre-defying performance at the Royal Albert Hall, something they never thought possible. At this point, you'd think we'd be numb to The Simpsons predicting reality. Super Bowls? Sure. Nobel Prize winners? Fine. But a riot at the US Capitol? Now that's something else entirely. Let's go back to 1996. The day the violence died, Season 7. A typical Simpsons episode until you notice something unsettling. A scene buried in a parody of Schoolhouse Rock where a walking, talking amendment sings about curbing freedom. It's goofy, it's absurd, and then it gets weirdly familiar. Because just as the amendment gets ratified, it turns to the crowd and yells, "Oh yeah, doors open, boys!" And that's when chaos erupts. A mob storms the steps of the US Capitol. They're waving weapons, cheering, setting off explosives. The whole thing is cartoonishly exaggerated, except it isn't. Not when you compare it to what happened 25 years later. January 6th, 2021. The world watches as an actual crowd charges the US Capitol. People pushing past barricades, breaking windows, forcing their way inside. The eerie similarity between the two moments, one drawn in bright colors, the other playing out on live television, hits like a punch to the gut. Now, skeptics will say, "Oh, it's just a coincidence. Just another random moment the Simpsons happen to get right." But how many times do we have to hear that excuse before it stops making sense? How many times can you chalk it up to luck before it starts looking like something else? It's one thing to predict a Super Bowl win. It's another to eerily foreshadow an event that shook a nation, one that nobody saw coming, except apparently a 1996 cartoon. At some point, you have to ask yourself, how deep does this go? Well, one thing's for sure. The Simpsons seem to have known human cloning would be a thing. It happened in 1998 in an episode called Lisa the Simpson, where Lisa's all stressed out thinking she's going to inherit the Simpson gene and lose her brains as she gets older. Okay, classic Lisa freakout, right? But here's where it gets weird. In the middle of this whole crisis, Dr. Hibbert drops this little bombshell. In the future, we'll be able to clone people like you. Just like that, offhand. Like it's no big deal. We're talking about human cloning, something that, at the time, was still considered way out there. This wasn't just a maybe one day kind of thing. It was a blatant, casually thrown out prediction. And we're all sitting there like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Right? But then reality smacks us in the face a few years later. Remember Dolly the sheep? Yeah, that sheep that was cloned in 1996. Suddenly, human cloning didn't seem so far-fetched anymore, huh? It was happening in a lab, in the real world, not just on some cartoon show. And it didn't stop there. The same technology that made Dolly possible, it's evolved. Big time. CRISPR, ever heard of it? That little gene editing tool has the power to rewrite DNA with the precision of a surgeon. Scientists are literally editing genes now like they're flipping through a manual. They're not just talking about cloning sheep anymore. No, they're creating human tissues, growing organs in labs. And let's not forget, the whole ethical debate. It's front and center. But it gets even worse than this. They even predicted grease grifting. In an episode from way back in 1998, The Simpsons managed to predict something that not only seemed absurd at the time, but somehow became a real-world phenomenon. So buckle up. In the Season 10 episode Lard of the Dance, Homer and Bart, the dynamic duo of trouble, stumble upon an opportunity that's so out there, it feels like it should be in some satirical cartoon. They decide to steal used cooking grease from local restaurants. And not just any grease. This stuff is like liquid gold. They sell it to a rendering plant and walk away with a tidy profit. You think it's all just a funny subplot, right? Well, keep reading, because reality came knocking years later. In the world we live in now, it turns out Homer and Bart weren't so far off. This grease grifting, yes, that's the term, is now a real deal. It's actually happening, people. Used cooking grease, or yellow grease as it's called, became a hot commodity in the 2000s. You know why? Biodiesel. That's right, The grease that once just piled up behind fast food joints is now worth a small fortune. And the thing is, it's not just about recycling some waste into renewable energy. It's the fact that grease thieves started to see it as money on the table. It became so valuable that people were swiping it left and right, sometimes with full-on trucks, siphoning the stuff straight from storage containers. I mean, what a heist, right? Now, don't get all comfy thinking that this was just some quirky side hustle. No, this stuff took off. Grease theft skyrocketed when biodiesel boomed. Suddenly, people weren't just taking it for fun. They were taking it because it could fuel cars, trucks, even machinery. The price of yellow grease shot up, and guess what? Theft followed. Thieves were in it for the cash. And while some grease collection is done legally by licensed companies, the shady stuff started happening under the radar. People began stealing from places like McDonald's, Wendy's, you name it. The grease was flowing, and so were the profits, just like Homer and Bart predicted. Of course, like any good conspiracy, there was a response. Municipalities started locking their grease containers, installing surveillance cameras, doing everything they could to prevent these grease bandits from running wild. And still, the thefts kept happening. It's almost like someone in the universe knew this was going to be a problem, and it wasn't just a hilarious cartoon joke. It was a reality waiting to unfold. And the crazy part? The Simpsons nailed it. They tapped into something that was still years away from becoming mainstream. The writers were way ahead of the curve. They didn't just come up with some throwaway gag. They saw a trend, and they knew it would come to life, fueled by environmental and economic pressures. Grease, something that once was an afterthought, became a treasure. A treasure, just like they predicted. You still think it's all just luck? That the show is just a random string of coincidences? Let me take you down another rabbit hole. This show knew about the Ebola outbreak before anyone else. Sounds insane, right? But it's there, tucked away in the 1997 episode titled Lisa's Sacks. Sure, it was just a quick, throwaway joke, but when you look closer, things start to get a little too real. There's a scene where Bart is sick in bed, and Marge, in her typical way, tries to distract him with a book. This book? Curious George and the Ebola virus. Yeah, I know, it sounds like something straight out of a dark, twisted comedy. But remember, this was 1997. Ebola? It was barely on the map for most people. Yet, here's this offhand reference, tucked in there like a quiet whisper of what's to come. Bart, of course, rejects the book and instead shows off one of his own drawings. It's a chaotic, post-apocalyptic mess, full of dead bodies and destruction. Creepy, right? And this wasn't just some random scene either. It's The Simpsons, so you know everything they put on screen has a meaning, even if it's hidden behind a joke. Fast forward to 2014, and suddenly, that throwaway mention of Ebola takes on a whole new significance. The largest Ebola outbreak in history kicks off in West Africa. The world watches in horror as over 11,000 people die. And you know what happens next. Fans of The Simpsons, conspiracy theorists, and skeptics alike all start making the same connections. Wait a minute, they say. That Ebola virus reference from the episode, that wasn't just some random dark humor, was it? They start pulling out clips, sharing them online, and suddenly, it feels less like a coincidence and more like a warning from the past. Let's pause and think for a second. Sure, the virus had been around for years. The first outbreaks occurred in the 70s, and by 1995, there was a significant outbreak in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. But back then, Ebola wasn't exactly making headlines. It was a deadly disease, sure, but it wasn't the household name it would become by 2014. So why include it? Was it really just some dark satire, or did the writers know something we didn't? It wasn't like the virus was all over the news, at least not in the way it would be just a few years later. And the crazy thing? The Simpsons was right in the middle of all this, long before the virus went viral in global media. They casually dropped a line about Ebola, And sure enough, that casual mention started to look a lot like a premonition.